Good evening, America, and happy Tuesday. Welcome to the latest edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from the nation's capital. We hope you're getting ready, getting closer to that Thanksgiving dinner with family and friends. But before we get into all that, a little programming note. We're awaiting President Trump's departure from the White House from Mar-a-Lago to his home in Palm Beach, Florida. When that happens, we'll get you out live to that, but we'll keep a close eye. You may see it pop up in the bottom right-hand screen from time to time, so keep an eye on it. All right. We start tonight with some hopeful news as we approach Thanksgiving. That's also the deadline that President Trump has set to get a deal worked out between Ukraine and Russia to end the war in Eastern Europe that's been going on now for, believe it or not, 11 years. Isn't that amazing? It's being reported that Ukraine has agreed to core terms of the U.S. peace proposal. Just the News has confirmed that. This is major movement, as previously Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been resistant to any peace proposal that involves ceding land to Russia. Now, there's still a lot of items that need to be worked out, but what for the first time we have today is a very clear set of what the Ukrainians are willing to agree to and what the Russians are willing to agree to. They worked that out earlier this week. The two sides had never laid that out before in this 11-year conflict. Now that each side knows what the other needs, that opens the real negotiations to the next major potential set of negotiations. Now, President Trump announced that he's sending Special Envoy Steve Whitcomb to Russia to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin to fine-tune the deal points. He's also sending Army Secretary Dan Driscoll back to the Ukrainian side, where he made some progress earlier this week. President Trump also said earlier today that there are only a few remaining points of disagreement. That is a hopeful sign. Now, turning back here to Washington, Internal Justice Department emails released today by Senate Republicans show that Special Counsel Jack Smith's team was told by the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section that if it subpoenaed the phone records of senators, that there were constitutional equities, congressional equities, meaning that there needed to be a litigation process and that the senators had to be notified. But guess what? That's not what Jack Smith did. Instead, he went to Judge Boasberg, now kind of infamous here in Washington, and got an order that said he did not have to tell Congress, alert them, or take any concern about the constitutional debate and speech clause that protects members of Congress from executive branch things. Now, there's some other interesting things in these emails. You can check the whole story out in justthenews.com. One of them is that Jack Smith actually made a bunch of errors in this, including having the wrong senator. He was supposed to be subpoenaing Rick Scott, but instead he focused on Senator Tim Scott for a period of time because he didn't have his I's and T's crossed or even his Scott's figured out. All right, with that, I want to turn to some other headlines from my amazing colleague, Amanda Head. Amanda, what are you watching today?
Yeah, John, I know that we've been talking about this throughout the week, but I want to stay on that topic of Senator Mark Kelly and those other Democrats who put out the video warning members of the military not to comply with nebulous illegal orders. We now know the DOJ and the FBI will be interviewing those Democrats for an investigation that they have opened. And we've been seeing a lot of reaction in the past few days from both politicians and the media. For example, here is how CNN and David Frum framed what an illegal order could be.
Secretary Hegseth has issued these tweets in which he said the Department of War is going to prosecute Senator Kelly. And then you had a clip at the top of your show from the White House Press Secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, saying the Secretary of War, the Department of War would never issue an illegal order. Well, calling it the Department of War is an illegal order. Every time that in violation of act of Congress, the Secretary makes up these titles for himself, Secretary of Partying, Secretary of War, whatever he calls himself. Those are illegal orders too.
How's that for trying to minimize the issue? And just to take it up a notch, Senator Ruben Gallego from Arizona, the same state that Senator Mark Kelly represents, has issued a warning to any member of the military that deals with Senator Kelly's case. Watch.
What is your level of trust in the U.S. military justice system, if it were to get that far, to handle this?
I trust them actually a lot, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, these are professionals. They are also swearing to the Constitution of the United States. They know that there will be fallout and consequences if they are used in a hard way to basically railroad someone like Senator Kelly, because Donald Trump's going to be gone a couple of years. And if you're part of the military that is going after sitting senators, sitting members of Congress, and part of, the weaponization of government, there will be consequences.
John, I know that this is anecdotal, but it also goes down to the policy level. Anytime you see President Trump or someone from this administration appearing before troops, they absolutely love them. They appreciate their loyalty to them. They appreciate the prioritization of the safety of America's troops and just putting America first. So it's unfortunate to see this happening, but I'm pretty sure I know where most of the military squares up on this side.
Well, I know where Pete Hegseth squares up because just a few minutes ago, he released an update. He has asked the Navy Secretary to get back to him by December 10th on whether or not Senator Kelly, a former Navy captain, former astronaut, whether he should face a court-martial, be brought back to active duty and face court-martial and take some disciplinary action for his role in that. As you know, once in the military, always in the military, you can always be summoned back. But Pete Hegseth setting a deadline and identifying the Navy Secretary as the man who will oversee that investigation. That's a pretty big deal. Pretty big deal. And we'll keep a close eye on that. That just moved over at justthenews.com. All right, earlier today, Amanda, while you were out reporting, I had a chance to hang out with Andy Biggs for a little bit. He missed you a lot, but we had a great conversation about Jack Smith, about weaponization, about all the things that are on the front burner of news on this holiday week, including the Ukraine-Russia peace talk movement. Have a look, everybody. It was a pretty newsy interview. All right, folks, joining us now to break down all of today's amazing news. It's a holiday week, but it doesn't feel like a holiday week. Lots of big news breaking out. He's a member of Congress from the great state of Arizona. He's also the leading candidate, Republican candidate for governor of that great state. He's our longtime friend, Congressman Andy Biggs. Congressman, great to have you on the show, sir.
Thanks, John. It's great to be with you. And before I forget, happy Thanksgiving to you, your family and loved ones, and your crew, and Amanda and her crew.
Well, thank you. And back at you, sir. Thank you for all you do for your country. I know you've worked hard to make a better America for the next generation, and we're grateful for that on this Thanksgiving. So thank you. All right, I want to jump in on some of the big news. I think a lot of people said, okay, I don't understand this cat and mouse game. Ukraine has one peace plan it's agreed to. Russia has one peace plan that it's agreed to. And how's that progress? But this is actually a strategy because neither side would talk to each other and say what they wanted. Donald Trump finally got it on paper. How big a moment is this, and how does it set the next wave of peace negotiations in motion?
Well, if you've ever negotiated anything, and virtually everybody has, if you don't understand what you want and what the other side wants, you can never get to yes. It's always going to be a no. And so to see that now both sides have defined their interests and their goals allows President Trump actually to come in and set additional parameters time-wise and to push it. And I think it always is going to come back down to territory, and that's going to be the issue. But in the meantime, there's a whole host of other issues that both sides are trying to get to. I think it's a defining moment and actually ratchets up the heat on both sides now to come to the table now that they've basically the cards are on the table.
Yeah, and all the U.S. officials, and by the way, this is the art of the deal in action, right? President Trump knew that the reason there wasn't peace for 11 years, an ongoing war, was that neither side really knew what the other side wanted out of a solution. Now it's in clarity, and that really does allow for an exchange of ideas. You mentioned territory. The other big one seems to be NATO membership for Ukraine. Ukraine seems to want to keep that on the table. Russia wants to take it off, but then have the United States guarantee Ukraine's security going forward. How do you think that issue gets worked out?
I think that one is one where you're going to see some give. Unfortunately, I don't want the U.S. to be the guarantors, if you want the truth. NATO and the European allies, they should be the guarantors. And if they are, then I think that Ukraine can live with that. And Ukraine's going to, but Russia's also wanting them to lose some armaments and size of their military. I think Ukraine's going to say, look, if you're going to make it so we have to defend ourselves, then we have to have what we need to defend ourselves. And I think in the end, Russia probably gives on that because that's not the big deal. The big deal for them is NATO membership.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that's where that give seems to be. It'll be interesting to see. I want to turn to something else that you have been so instrumental in. You were one of the first members of Congress that I saw out there every day trying to dig into Russia collusion and weaponization, the weaponization of the courts, the weaponization of congressional committees, the weaponization of the Justice Department, the FBI, the CIA. We now have some new evidence about Jack Smith in Arctic frost, probably the most troubling of all the investigations. We now know from records that Senator Johnson and Grassley released today that Jack Smith was told, hey, if you go with the subpoena, Congress has certain equities like the debate and speech protection clauses of the Constitution. They're going to have to litigate this. And instead, Jack Smith took that, went to Judge Boasberg and said, I just want to get a protective order and avoid the whole fight with Congress, not have to tell them I'm taking their phone records, not have to comply with the laws on the book. The fact that he was told what he should do and then he did something different, what does it say about Jack Smith and maybe his co-conspirator, Judge Boasberg?
Well, with Jack Smith, this is just only one of a myriad and host of problems of his investigation. He was on a witch hunt. That's what he was doing. If it wasn't overt, it certainly was a nudge, nudge, wink, wink kind of thing. He knew what he was called in to do, and that was to attack Donald Trump and Donald Trump's supporters. And he did so. The fact that he was told that he had to probably go get some litigate the equities and protect the rights of the senators and members of Congress who are protected under the Constitution, and he failed to do so, is just one more black mark against Jack Smith. But here's the thing that really has been grinding me for some time, and that is Judge Boasberg. As you know, I introduced legislation more than a year ago now, I think it is, to actually remove Judge Boasberg from the bench. I don't think that he is serving under good behavior. I think he's exhibited horrible behavior. I think he has an inherent bias. And I know everybody says, well, judges have biases, but in this particular case, his family has a bias, he has a bias, and he was actually issuing orders where he should have known that there was a constitutional protection that was in place, and he was deliberately going around it. So those are the types of things that lead us to Judge Boasberg, where there's impeachment resolutions against him. There's an Article 3, Section 1 removal, and that's mine, against him. And I think we look at it and say Judge Boasberg was a catalyst to the weaponization of certainly the Arctic frost investigation by Jack Smith, but also anytime anybody else was coming up, Judge Boasberg was right there attacking this administration or President Trump when he was out of office even.
35 years ago, as a very young reporter, I wrote a story that a federal judge had been ruling in cases where he owned stock. He hadn't disclosed his financial conflict of interest. The Chief Justice at the time, William Rehnquist, within days intervened and severely punished that judge for not complying with the law. John Roberts, the current Chief Justice, has been rather silent, even as there are growing signs that there is dysfunction in the courts. Is this his moment to maybe stand up and mete out some discipline? He doesn't have to wait for Congress or impeachment. He can impose his own discipline as the chief disciplinarian. What do you think about John Roberts weighing in?
Well, I'm thinking he's not going to weigh in. I mean, he should have weighed in my opinion, long ago, and he has chosen not to. And I think he's in his mind, perhaps he's saying, well, that's a political question. We're going to stay out of politics. But it isn't just a political question, and this is why he should weigh in. He needs to weigh in to protect the integrity of the courts. And the integrity of the courts is going to hell in the handbasket, John, because nobody in America really trusts the courts anymore. I don't care whether you're right or left. You're not trusting the courts. The left doesn't trust them. That's why they go there when they're in power to try to get the leftist judges to whack the right. Conservatives. The conservatives go there hoping that conservative justices will actually protect them from the assault from the left. Neither side thinks that these guys are these men and women of the court are honest, fair, equitable brokers. Each side believes that there is a bias there that each one's going to exploit. And so Judge Roberts, by sitting on his hands, is fostering greater insecurity and disruption in American society because the courts are absolutely no longer trusted as fair and honest brokers.
Judge Boasberg specifically said you don't have to tell Congress, even though there was a law in the books that any phone records taking of Congress would have to be notified to at least the Senate Sergeant at Arms. giving that instruction, does the judge have the right to abrogate enforcement of a law?
No, a judge does not. In fact, what the courts are supposed to do, according to the founders, they were supposed to be the weakest branch. They're supposed to not interpret the law. They're not supposed to legislate from the bench. They're supposed to do what? They're supposed to enforce the law and apply the law. That's what they're supposed to do. Apply the law to the facts and case before them. To do otherwise is to go outside their bounds and scope of authority. And that's Congress and the executive branch have both failed to bring judges to bear on that. And that's one of the reasons I've started the Article 3, Section 1 project that I've done with that bill. And the bottom line is, as long as the judiciary is with impunity, acting outside its scope, they become the most powerful branch of government when the founders intended them to be the weakest branch of government.
Yeah, pretty remarkable. It really is. Congressman, we're so grateful for the clarity of your voice. Also, all the work you've done to help us understand where our government has gone awry. We're very lucky to have you on the front lines of this important time in history. Thanks for joining us today. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you, John. Always great to be with you. Tell Amanda I missed her.
I will. She misses you as well. Happy Thanksgiving, my friend. All right, folks, we're going to take a closer look at the possible peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. Dig into that a little bit more with President Trump's former Deputy National Security Advisor. We'll have that next. Could there be war ended by Thanksgiving? We'll answer that question next after these messages.